Hi, everyone. Thank you for joining. I want to pick up a topic that I know is high on many of your minds, and it's the whole topic of change management in digital transformations. I've always said digital is easy, transformation is hard. And transformation is hard because it's a lot more than just digital. There are many other elements involved in it. One of the most critical elements is change management. And so today, we're going to unpack what that means and the learnings we have across the industry on what are best practices. And to do that, I've got a fantastic guest. Ana Maria, welcome. Thank you for joining.
Thanks so much, Sanjay. It's a pleasure to be with you.
It's great to have you here, and I'll explain why in a minute. But before we do that, Ana Maria, can you, you've got an incredible view of the landscape. You work across large corporations, across many different industries, and you spend your time thinking through change management and helping those companies transform. Tell us a little bit about how you got to your current work.
Sure. Thanks. Thanks for that. So it's interesting because the first part of my career, I was in finance and investments, and I was, so to speak, the analytics or quant jock in the house. And I ended up privileged enough to head up a benefits transformation, specifically in the retirement benefit space. And it was the most interdisciplinary project that I had been a part of. So it included ops and advisory and branding and comms and legal and all of the regulatory and all those different elements. And I just fell in love with the world of transformation, leaning deeply into this field of behavioral economics and neuroscience and the like, to design it well and to design it for sustainability. And I've never looked back. And so ever since, I've been kind of part in the consulting world and part in-house at the intersection of strategy, leadership, and culture, leading large-scale transformations in the space where it matters most, which is in the space of people and humans. Because after all, organizations don't change, people do. And so that's my craft, and that's my love and passion.
It comes through completely as you speak. And what's amazing about that, and there's so much you said in there, but what's amazing for me is this quant jock and neuroscience and human resources and transformation. And it's kind of this perfect balance of this hard science and engineering and this kind of soft, components. And it's so great to see. So thank you for joining us. I think it's going to be a great conversation. Um, Look, I wanna actually now unpack this a little bit. And I know I started by saying digital is easy, transformation is hard. And of course, change management is a large part of what makes transformation successful. Um, as I speak with CIOs and digital professionals across the globe, one of the key things that comes back is, look, you got to get a few things right. And there's a lot of debate and discussion on this topic. And it's all about hiring. It's all about communications. It's all about really thinking through, change management. And so we'll pick those. And I want to go through communications. I want to go through hiring, and I want to go through training.
Mm-hmm.
Um, Tell us about communications, the role it has in change management, and what have you learned as you've worked across the industry on this?
Communications is often thought of as the thing that is, that's change management. You think of change management, then you think of comms, and yet it's not that simple. A lot of people think, if we tell them, then they will come, so to speak. If they just knew the right, if they just understood, of course they would get there. But it's never that easy. I mean, there's a reason why change management is considered, the hearts and minds, because it's not just about the minds, it's not just about the cognitive, it's not just about the rational, it's about the emotional as well.
And so,
Um,
what's the trick to doing it right? Like, what have you seen someone do that's really well done on this one aspect?
Hmm. I think it's deeply embracing. I mean, talk about the neuroscience. It's deeply embracing that understanding of how humans work, that oftentimes emotions drive our actions and our decisions. And so it's understanding the life cycle of one's change curve and understanding that at the onset, for example, of a transformation, you're probably going to want to speak more to the emotion, lower those anxieties, make sure that your communication is not bombarding them with so much information, which produces cognitive overload, but really coming from a place of empathy and understanding and starting there. And then you can build on all of the know-how and the reasoning and the rationale, but you have to capture them. I don't know, that was with Jerry Maguire. You had me at hello. Okay, you have to have them at the emotional level to be able to build on that.
That's fascinating. It's interesting. You talked about change and getting to the hearts and minds. One of the things about change management and the work you do, I'm sure has changed as we've gone through the pandemic and we're all sheltered away from offices. What does that mean for your role? How do you deal with that? How do you change what you do as a result of the pandemic?
That's a great question. And to be clear, nobody's cracked it. Nobody feels it's a first for all of us, really. And so it's infusing a little humor and the human into what is otherwise a 2x2 or whatever the size of our Zoom boxes are nowadays. It's creating those extra spaces that otherwise would exist as we run across, each other in the hallways. How do you do that in a way that enables that relatedness?
Yeah.
So that people don't feel siloed, so that people still feel a sense of belonging, so that people can absorb and do the things that you're asking them to do in a way that doesn't lose them along the way.
I love that, right? I love that because actually the pandemic has forced us to be more thoughtful about communication per se. And then now applying it back to, from normal life back into change management, you can see the role it plays and how powerful it is when you do it right. And yet how much effort you have to put in to get there.
Yeah.
Excellent, excellent. Okay, so we talked about communications, big part of change management. Let's
Yes.
turn to hiring, to talent. How do you bring that in? What works, what doesn't work? What's your experience there?
Yes, great question. So it's often thought of that, when you hire, you can just get in that new blood and all it's the panacea, all things will be fixed, but that's rarely the case. In fact, I find that the more intentional CXOs are in the process of hiring, or just any leaders leading transformations, the better the outcome. And what I mean is, so being thoughtful, and there's three options that come to mind right now for me as we're talking. So one is finding a part in the organization where those new people can thrive and not activate the immune system in the organization to reject them. And so what does that actually mean to set them up for success? Where in the organization are they most likely to have that breathing room to try, to fail, to experiment and create that tipping point? That's one way to go. Another one is to very specifically think about where those new hires could be and place them intentionally in those elements where they can collectively then coordinate and collaborate to create that tipping point and kind of create the changes that you want to create, again, without activating that resistance. Actually, those are two that come to mind very immediately. And then there could be, I guess, a carte blanche at the leadership level, but that tends to backfire pretty quickly.
Ana Maria, is so true. One of the things that as I work with chief digital officers across the industry, I hear a lot about is the hardest part of the role. And this is the paradox of transformation. You need enough of a outside in mentality because you can bring in new ideas, new paradigms, think outside of the boxes, do all the innovative stuff that kind of sits outside and bring that back into the ecosystem. But then you also need to be enough of an insider so you can, because transformation is fundamental, it's grounds up change. You have to drive it at scale in mass. And that requires enough of internal credibility, engagement, support, championship management, all of the components that come from being an insider. And I think as you correctly called out, just hiring or just talent doesn't solve the equation. It's actually getting the right mix of that outsider and the insider and creating the right environment around it. And it's more than just recruiting, it's more than hiring.
For sure. For sure.
Yeah, super interesting, super interesting. Anything that specifically comes to mind as you work across different industries, different large corporations on something someone's done really well in this area that you might leave as a best practice with us?
On the hiring front or in general?
And getting people settled into the larger organizations. There's an organ rejection, there's an appreciation of the new and yet enough of an understanding of the old so you can bring it.
Yeah, I think while no immediate organizations come to mind, I think you're touching upon that point of at the end of it, it's humility and empathy, not assuming you have the right answer. And that comes both from the hiring leader standpoint, as well as those who then go into organizations. And so when I've seen it happen well is when people think about onboarding and the integration in the organization with that level of empathy and inquiry, appreciative inquiry, and the pathway into that integration is a long one. So long gone are the days when onboarding was, the immediate hit the ground, 30 days, you're done. No, that's not feasible. That's not possible. And when you think about the replacement costs of those new hires, if they don't make it, it's just phenomenally large. And so being thoughtful about that pathway and integrating those people in the organization is key.
I love the word you used, humility, because that is so key. And many of the forward leaning companies now are already changing their recruiting principles. And as an example, we don't hire for skills anymore; we hire for attitude. And this notion of humility, of assimilating and being open to new ideas, is such an important thing. So thank you for that. Hey, I'm going to pick the third thing that came to mind when I first thought about change management, and maybe I'll have you reflect on that. Training, right? Panacea or a new problem set? How do you feel about that?
So training is such a passion for me. So I've headed up L&D organizations, and it's just I'm a geek in that space. And so for as much as I embrace it and love it, and again have been responsible for it, I often find that it's the go-to. It's arguably the easy thing. You can track it. Did people complete this training? Did people do that thing? Create a program, roll it out. I get it. But oh my goodness, I've seen it backfire so many times. In largely in two spaces, right? So we're thinking about like hard skills training and soft skills training. If the ecosystem responsible for holding those people isn't ready to kind of itself absorb that new behavior or those new skills, that training is for naught. In fact, I find that training is often, I want to say, fourth or fifth in line. Once you set up the infrastructure, the rewards, the leadership mindsets, the processes, the design, to then be able to house that new knowledge set. So if it's a hard skill thing, if it's not immediately applicable, they're going to forget it, forgetting curve 101. If it's a soft skill thing and that person then tries, they go out on a limb, they risk themselves and they really try that new mindset or behavior that you want them to do, and their manager doesn't reward that, if their manager poo-poos it, or they get other signals from the organization that they're kind of out on a limb and they're not supported, you lost them. You only have so many bullets. And then of course you just increase it's almost like antibiotic resistance. You just increase it now, because the next time you want to go around and you're asking them to kind of risk and take a stab at something, they're going to remember that last pain point, and it's just a much harder barrier to overcome thereafter.
I think you raised such an important point. And I think the way I think about that is true learning is a multifaceted exercise, not just training. There's so much more than training that gets you to learning. Well said. Well, Ana Maria, I know we have to let you go, and we could talk for an hour on this, but just as before we let you go, if you had to sort of leave our audience here with with one advice, one thing that you want to leave us with, right? What is across all of the work you've done in transformation and change management across the world, right? What's the one thing you want to leave with us today?
Small ask. No, I think it would be around the power, the true power of alignment. An A strategy poorly aligned upon is actually far worse than a B strategy with everybody around it. It's like a boat in many ways. You can have the most perfect direction, strategic, but if the boat doesn't move because people drop the oar, people are rowing in a different direction, or others jump out altogether, you're not going anywhere. And so never underestimate the power of alignment, and don't go for that perfect strategy, because there's no such thing anyway.
What a powerful concept. You've left us almost wanting so much more on this topic. We'll have you come back another time. We want to unpack some of these things, but thank you for your time today. Really, really appreciate it. And good luck with everything you're doing. So important.
Thank you so much.
Take care. And to our audience, thank you for joining. Look forward to the next time. Bye-bye.